You're back live tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. This year marks 47 years since the June 16 Soweto uprising, where hundreds of young people were killed by the apartheid machinery. The protests were in response to the introduction of Afrikaans as a medium of instruction in black schools. Commemorations are centered around the theme, accelerating youth economic emancipation for a sustainable future. For more on the problems facing young people, we're joined now by the National Youth Development Agency CEO, Waseem Carrim, social justice activists, Anisa Mazimpaka, the South African Youth Indaba's Tebogo Motlana, as well as Enoch Mgijima, local municipalities, Aphiwe, Mkhangelwa. You are part of the conversation tonight with issues that you would like to raise as we come into this Youth Day this coming week on 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. What, in your view, is making the youth development machinery ineffective? What are your thoughts tonight? We'll take your WhatsApp in a moment. Gentlemen, in the studio, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. And Anisa and Aphiwe joining us on the line as well. Thank you very much for coming on. It's good to have you. Waseem, let's start with you because, of course, you are the entity that is being given this responsibility. Another Youth Day coming up. Maybe let's start in the youth days themselves, right, and what they do. Get this out of there. One of the issues that you're dealing with right now is the abuse of 5 million rands on this event. We've got another one coming up. You yourself are currently apparently being investigated, or you will be investigated, according to what the chairperson is saying in one of the interviews, that there is an independent investigation that is underway. There's an impression that these events don't do anything except funnel some kind of funds and they're being misused.
Yeah, thanks, Thabo. So I think, past events will have their necessary requirements and investigations, and I'm sure when those things are complete, they'll be made publicly available for people to study. But I think one of the things we've said as the NYDA and the board and government at large is that these kind of mass-based rallies, which were very prominent post-1994, are no longer really relevant to young people. They're not what young people respond to. You bring a whole mobilization of young people to listen to speeches on the day, and yet you're still faced with many of the same problems after that you had before. And one of the things that we have come to realize is that young people themselves are very responsive to opportunities, whether these opportunities are made available online or in person. And that is why we took a decision to completely change the way we commemorate June 16th this year. We'll be in Mangaung, but one of the things we've said is that we want a career and opportunities expo for young people, where there are live opportunities across the Friday and the Saturday that young people can be able to access. We've said we'll create a space where young entrepreneurs who sell food and beverages can showcase their skills. We've said that young artists can come. So that we've really flipped on its head the way we commemorate Youth Day, Youth Month, because really what it needs to be about is being relevant to this generation of young people, and that means making opportunities available to them.
Are you able to do that? I'll tell you why. I mean, I spoke to the Minister, Women, Children and People with Disability Youth. From what I'm hearing from her, at least a good 70 to 80% of her budget goes to you, right? We've got close to 20 million youth. 36% of the population is youth, 15 to 34. And if you look at the numbers, they will tell you, because you've looked at the landscape, it's part of what you need to do. At least we are talking about 900,000 to 1 million young people entering the job market at different levels. Right. A number of them having dropped out at grade 12, a number of them finishing and not going past grade 12, and a few number of them actually getting through into tertiary education. And even that particular percentage that goes on to get jobs is really minute. I think a big 54% of them who are unemployed and who are entering this job market have less than matric. How do you see the impact of the budget that you have making a difference in those numbers, especially considering that you are an entity, just obviously an advocating entity. You're not really able to implement anything at this point.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 points to be made there, right? One is that it's not only about financial resources. If you look at what Premier Lesotho is able to do in Gauteng, right, is reprioritize existing budgets to make opportunities available for young people, job opportunities, skills development opportunities, learning opportunities, right? Just in the last 3 years, government has been able to create an additional 1 million opportunities through an employment stimulus package. You look at a program like the Basic Education Employment Initiative, where we had 250,000 young people placed as teachers' assistants and general assistants in schools. A lot has been invested in the NYDA itself, right? We created 50,000 youth service opportunities for young people. So there is, where there is political will to be able to reprioritize budgets towards young people, it can be achieved and it can be done at scale, right? So I think that conversation definitely is there and continues to be had. And it doesn't only need to be through NYDA, it could be through all spheres of government to be able to be implemented. Number 2 is that without structural change in the economy, without addressing the things that hold this economy back, we're not going to be able to create jobs at the level. Public employment, skills opportunities can only go so far. Yeah? And we have to confront the heavy issues that are holding the economy back: electricity, transportation, connectivity. Yeah. And then we'll start to see catalytic change that will be able to create opportunities at scale, not just for young people, but for people, because we do have the highest unemployment rate in the world. Yeah.
Anisa, let's bring in here. Let's talk to those 2 issues. Firstly, the change in the approach to youth days, the events themselves, and the impetus now to make them at least spaces where opportunities are put on display for young people to take advantage of, but then also talk to the effectiveness of the development machinery as it is set up right now, as far as the support that comes from the NYDA. Please unmute for us there.
Thank you very much for having me, and a very good evening to your viewers. I think he is correct when he speaks about doing away with the rallies. Yes, that was the protest style of the past generation. However, I think what we need to do as the youth of today is to actually realize that we exist in our different formations, because you would find that the people that attend these rallies are the youth that are within the political space. And one thing about the youth of our generation is that we are found in different spaces. We are found in a political space. We are found in the professional space. We are found in different spaces. And what the rallies did, they just accommodated one set of the youth. So I think that is true. But also, it's very important to note that we should not just be having these rallies or these celebrations just when Youth Month approaches, because the issues that face the youth are cross-cutting throughout the year. So, these opportunities should be made readily available throughout the year, not just focusing on Youth Month.
Right. Tebogo, with us here in the studio, you are in fundraising, so for you, issues of raising money are particularly important. The effectiveness of monies that are being pumped into youth development.
Good evening, Tabo. Good evening to the viewers. With the issues of money as a resource, money is very much important when it comes to making everything happen. A lot of young people that in our communities, in townships, in rural communities, they start businesses, but come to the issue of getting money, it becomes a challenge. More especially because of the number of red tapes that exist within the institutions that have been entrusted with giving young people money. For instance, you can't find me as a young person in my community having started a business and running that particular business, and it's growing, and you say just because I don't have bank statements, therefore I cannot be able to access the funding that I need to be able to grow my business. Because in most cases, what I've seen with these government institutions, they've put a lot of workshops and a lot of training, whatever, in space for young people. But how do you train someone that is already running something and you want them 5 days in that particular workshop and for them to leave their business? So they'll rather compromise that opportunity you're affording them in terms of them accessing training, and then they focus on their business. Because the issue of money. It's very important. You cannot shy away from it.
So what are you saying? You're saying as opposed to Waseem hosting another 5-day workshop, would you rather have an implementing officer, implementing agent come to your business and assist you there where you're actually making money?
That's very correct. I think that's where the NYDA need to re-strategize and basically look at things differently, because it can't be that when a young person is looking for an opportunity, they have to take 5 taxis to get to whatever NYDA offices or whatever training venue that they've been invited at. It's a matter of now taking development to the people, where young people can be reached wherever they are in terms of their businesses. And that implementing agency or consultant that has been entrusted to grow you as a business is there to show you how to do whatever it is that you are doing, how to improve on whatever it is that you need to improve on, without compromising you leaving your space. Because you leaving your space for 30 minutes, it could be that it's a loss of a single client or 2.
Yeah. Aphiwe, if we look at the areas that NYDA needs to address in terms of 5 key pillars, one of them is economic transformation, and that particular area speaks to entrepreneurship. Participation in entrepreneurship in the youth is relatively small. South Africa's total entrepreneurial activity in the 25 to 35-year-old cohort sitting at 9.2% at least, or about there. What do you think is leading to that?
No, thank you, Mr. Mdluli. I think the first problem that we have is that one of the structural shift in the country's economy. Now you are seated with a system that is doing away or changing from being labor intensive to being technologically driven. And then when you look at the geographical spread and the kinds of groups that we have within the country, we have more rural sides in terms of where I'm residing here in the Eastern Cape, particularly in Criswell. So these programs that the NYDA offers and the budget that they are allocated, the agencies are allocated, you would find that it is quite difficult. It is quite difficult for it to stretch to the dusty corners, the rural areas, the locations that we reside from, because most of our youth would not have access to such opportunities such that they can make use of it. And I'm certain that with the allocation that is made to the NYDA, if it can be added and be stressed enough such that it can all be inclusive in all the satellite offices of the NYDA. Because now when you reach the satellite offices of the NYDA, you would then find it difficult to get responsive programs to the challenges that we are facing and to reach the locations that we need to reach, which is more rural locations. And again, what makes our participation a bit less is the nature of how youth is perceived within our systems, all spheres, local government sphere, provincial and national. Treating young people as a unit is a bit problematic. Treating young people as a unit, with all the complex challenges that we are facing, your student debt, your unemployment, the quality of education, and etc. It makes it difficult to hold accountable all the departments that ought to have a clear, concise program that talks to youth in general, both entrepreneur, business-wise and also employment-wise. So if we can start to realize the concept of having directorates, which is a directorate from a provincial sphere, a local government sphere, national sphere, having directorates that will be able to enforce implementation of many pronouncements that have been made that talks to young people. It was pronounced that young people, as it relates to the entry-level jobs, there must be no experiences. But young people, we continue to see many posts being advertised having entry-level posts. We continue to see business proposals or business interests that we are called as young people to respond to. When you check on the functionality of all those calls, it makes it difficult for young people to qualify to be part of those projects, to be part of those business initiatives. And it handicaps the response of young people in terms of participating in those streams of the economy.
You're back live tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. Still with us, we've got CEO of the National Youth Development Agency, Waseem Carrim, social justice activist Anisa Mazimpaka, the South African Youth Indaba's Tebogo Motlana, as well as the Enoch Mgijima local municipalities, Aphiwe, Mkhangelwa, and your views and your thoughts tonight coming through on WhatsApp. So 3 things that are coming through there, Waseem, that you need to speak to. The first one is the question of access. I mean, part of course, your mandate is to develop the integrated youth development strategy and to overlook its implementation, and not to implement it, but at least to monitor that it's being implemented by the necessary departments and to engage. But one of the targets that you had set for yourself was the question of being able to consult even at the local municipality level. How you doing as far as that is concerned? Doesn't seem to be going far enough. 2, the segmentation of young people in terms of their various levels of education and various levels of economic needs, and then this question of doing away with the experiment requirement.
Yeah, thanks. You'll have to remind me in case I forget. But I think if you look at segmentation of young people, right, it's completely true that young people exist in different spheres, in the professional space, in the entrepreneurship space, even in different communities of practice, right? And I think the NYD has got to find a balance between every community that we reach out to, or every grouping of young people, right? Because right now, the largest situation you have is that we know young people are most affected by youth unemployment, and we know that's mainly in rural-based and township-based youth, right? So you also have to pick that's the majority of young people you need to reach, because it's the most vulnerable and marginalized in society, right? But you marry that with working with young professionals, for example. We've developed programs where young professionals who've succeeded are able to mentor those young people who are up and coming in business. I think understanding the constituency that you serve, and particularly working with organized young people, right, is very important. And I think the NYD has done well, even if I say so myself, in working with different organized structures of young people, whether they be in business, labor, civil society. Yeah? If we talk about work experience, right? I mean, I spoke about some of the programs before, but you talk about 250,000 opportunities. South Africa's largest, one of the largest in the world public employment programs, right, that was rolled out post-pandemic, the teachers' assistants and general assistants. There was no requirements for experience. There was not even a requirement for a matric certificate, right? And that happened at scale to be able to support young people. Yeah? I understand that there may still be instances where different organizations require experience in the waveforms, and we are keeping an eye on that with the DPSA. We push back severely. It's not regulated where we are right now. It's something which is not very easy to regulate, but it is something that's being monitored. And we do push back at national level, at provincial level, and at local government level. Yeah. On the issue of presence, I think we need to think a little bit differently about South Africa's problems. Right now, we find ourselves in a physical crisis, right? We don't have enough money to buy diesel to keep generators on at Eskom. The likelihood of NYDA having an office in every local municipality, I think, is an idea that may be a little bit far off where we are right now. We've gone from being only in metros in South Africa to being almost in every district in the country, right? So at least we've aligned ourselves with the district development model. Yeah? But I think we need to think differently about how we reach young people and how young people access the services of government. For example, we've developed the SAYouth.mobi platform in collaboration with a number of government departments in the private sector. Right? We know one of the challenges that face young people is the high cost of data. Yeah? Now, young people can access that platform, which is data-free, and access both learning and earning opportunities. My colleague spoke about the fact that it's difficult for young people to come in for a 5-day workshop. We've made training available data-free on that platform so that you don't necessarily have to come into an NYDA office. So I also think we need to think about the fact that we are in an era where there's digital intake, right? And that the way we support young people has to be innovative and it has to be accessible in nature.
Yeah. How are you answering that particular question? Because that's part of what is being raised, that maybe the other question is how people access these things, and maybe other people are not trained technologically, they don't have those skills in how they can access these opportunities, which you're saying most of them are now pushing to online for easy accessibility.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's an important question, and I think there's already a balance of work that's happening in that sector, right? If you look at the Integrated Youth Development Strategy, it talks about the introduction of things like coding and robotics into the curriculum, which is already being done at basic education level, right? We see in technical and vocational training colleges where a lot of money has been invested by the Department of Higher Education and Training. Yeah. A lot of focus on digital and tech and making that more accessible to young people. Even if you were to go to the level of community colleges in South Africa, Tusong centers, yeah, we can find a number of accessibility points, libraries for that matter, where young people can access different services of government. Yeah. So I think a lot of the conversation needs to be about, not about how many more offices we need to put. I don't think South Africa has a shortage of infrastructure, but it's how we maximize the existing infrastructure that's already there for the benefit of young people in this country.
Yeah. Anisa, from a lens of young people and with regards, of course, to the Integrated Youth Development Strategy, the National Development Plan 2030, what are the easy pickings, low-lying fruits that you think could certainly quickly give us the kind of outcomes that we want to see? Don't forget to unmute there for us. Thanks.
I think it's more an issue of skills. I think for the longest time, the youth have been sold the fact that formal education is the only form of education. And that's where social justice through education comes into play, because as long as we equip the youth with the necessary skills needed, then they are able to go back to their communities or their respective communities to fix whichever issues occur, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's education, whether it's just issues happening within the community. So I think just equipping the youth with the necessary skills and training that they need. But also I'd like to touch on what the CEO said, and he's very right. It's more a structural issue. You can have as many offices as you want, but are these offices actually achieving what they need to achieve? One thing that he touched on was mentioning the digitization of the National Youth Development Agency. And I think it's back to his question of, or his assurance of the fact that it's a structural issue. Because how many percentage of these youth that actually require this assistance have access to mobile devices? We find ourselves in a country where we are advancing towards the fourth industrial revolution, or rather we are in the fourth industrial revolution. But we find that we have places in South Africa that don't even have access to electricity, let alone these devices. What I like from what my colleague, I think Aphiwe, said was speaking about a youth directorate. And being a youth from Johannesburg, I'm actually looking forward to what the executive mayor in the city of Johannesburg had actually mentioned in his State of the City address, where he mentioned that they will be reactivating the youth directorate. That is something that I look very forward to see what change this youth directorate can actually bring for the people of the city of Johannesburg. And I'm hoping that with that, plus the NYDA offices that exist, and all other youth formations, we are able to, reactivate youth and youth participation, not just in one sphere, but in different spheres.
Yeah. Waseem, quickly on that one, youth directorate, in terms of the monitoring framework of the implementation of the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we are able to give you an audit of every national department, every provincial government department, every local government, the youth directorates, what it looks like, are they functional, right? And I want to agree with my colleagues that where you have a dedicated youth directorate, where you structure it properly, where you fund it properly, it does drive accountability in the system, because it's a strong lobby and advocacy and mainstreaming balance within different institutions of government. Yeah? So we do encourage different spheres of government to be able to implement youth directorates. And it also makes our life a little bit easier, because we have formal structures to be able to work through. And young people themselves have access through different structures of government to be able to access government programs and government services. So it is very critical. Right now, I mean, our data tells us about 50 to 60% only have functional youth directorates, and we really try and support government in being able to implement these because they are very important and critical to the youth development agenda.
Back live tonight as we continue looking at those overreaching themes when it comes to youth development in the country, and in a panel conversation still with the National Youth Development Agency CEO Waseem, Carrim, social justice activists Anisa Mazimpaka, the South African Youth Indaba's Tebogo Motlana, and the Enoch Mgijima local municipalities Aphiwe, Mkhangelwa. Tebogo, let's come back to you. One of the areas of particular concern is the informal sector in which young people seemingly are keen to participate, and whether we have a structured approach and a structured plan in how we bring in those young people to begin to have some kind of meaningful participation.
Yeah, Tabo, young people are a homogeneous group of people. Their interests vary a lot, and you find that a lot of them, they've made a way to make an income using informal means. Like, for instance, you have now photographers in the townships, you have videographers for weddings and various other functions, you have those who are hawkers, and. It's just that the unfortunate part is that the efforts to be able to develop young people, they are not coordinated. There's a lot of fragmentation that is happening. When you speak to a local government official, does not know what happens in the provincial government.
Or, for example, you have a local government that says, no, you don't want people selling on the street, so they keep them all.
Yeah, they come with the bylaws and say, what you are doing here is illegal. Yeah. Yet they are the very same people that say, vugu zenzel. Now, when you are vugging and zenzeling yourself there, these people, they are now saying, no, this does not abide to our bylaws. Yeah. You have to move and find yourself maybe a garage or whatever. And you find that sometimes even the very same facilities that you're talking about, garages and so on, they are non-existent. Yeah. So a young person is just basically taking an opportunity to make ends meet. Yeah. And the other thing with regards to digitization, it's all good and well, but there's a gap. There's a divide, because you find that young people in rural areas don't have those particular facilities. Young people in township communities, they do have the facilities or the infrastructure, but they do not have the skills. Now, how do you talk fourth industrial revolution, robotics, coding, and while someone does not even know if they touch a button on the keyboard, it will explode or something will happen? It's a matter of saying, how do you then onboard young people onto these particular things that you are saying they exist, such that they are familiar with them, so that they can be able to take themselves from the level of not knowing to a level where they are skilled enough to know that, oh, now I'm capable of doing this, now I can go and venture into that particular industry or that particular industry. If the government efforts are not coordinated, for example, I'll make an example, typical example, 6,000 young people, Green Army, right? We saw a moria of young people in Johannesburg, Elof Street, who were there with their CVs, IDs, and everything. At the end of the day, they had to be chased there by the police and Metro Police, because they no, we said to you it's closed to bring in your CVs. Yeah. So what do you do in that regard? It means that there's no coordinated efforts, because we know that particular kind of development, already there's people who are cleaning the streets in their communities. Why isn't it that the provincial government moved and said, okay, fine, let's look at different communities or different wards within our municipalities and see what people are doing, and see what is it that we as the government can bring to those people and say, we're already seeing your efforts, here is what we can offer you. Coordination, the buzzword there, Waseem. Are you able to jump in? For example, in something like that, are you able to say to the local municipality, but hold on, you're closing the spaces, where are they going to go? These young people, maybe they are cutting their hair there on the street. Where do you come in there and certainly say, okay, this is what we can provide? But two, that question, you mentioned Panyaza and the wardens, right? Mm. One would say great initiative to get young people employed, but I'm sure the need is bigger. And when you're saying 6,000, 5,000, 2,000 here and there,
Is there a conversation that's happening with the NYDA to say what is really the scope of what we need to address here? And if we open this portal, we're going to have 100,000 people coming to line up there. What's going to happen next?
No, of course. I think that's important. So one is that we take this issue of informal activity very seriously, right? Where, I mean, I remember the president himself was very angry, you know. I remember there was a story about a young woman who was selling dog baskets, you know, and she was chased away by the metro officials, yeah. And I mean, it gets coverage at the highest levels of government, you know. And I think we do intervene wherever we can, right, where we get complaints of, because we shouldn't criminalize informal activity, right. Of course, things should operate within the requirements and the bylaws and things like that. And I think here in Gauteng, again, through the Township Development Bill, for example, there was a lot of good work that has been done, right, to be able to increase the amount of informal activity in the country. Yeah? Is there a need out there? The need is massive, right? We have close to 8 million unemployed young people, right? So, and you see it every time you advertise an internship or public employment opportunity, the amount of applications far exceeds. And it kills this myth that young people in this country are lazy or they don't want to work, because young people do want to participate in the economy, right? I think South Africa faces a massive policy fork in the road, right? Because there's a lot of advocates who feel that for all the efforts that have been made, right? And there has been a lot of goodwill towards, you know, addressing unemployment and things like that. For all of those efforts, we seem to run fast just to stay in the same position. And there's a lot of people that feel that South Africa just needs to get to the point where, to prevent a crisis, we pay a basic income grant to everybody, yeah, who's unemployed in the country. So we have a better social protection, something beyond what is the current 350 social relief of distress grant. And then there's other viewpoints that feel that, you know, young people shouldn't be subjected to standing in a queue every month to collect 350 rand, you know, just to meet their basic needs. That, do we want a society of young people who are able to work out there, yeah? And who have ability to contribute to the economy? And I think if all of us look around South Africa, I don't want to express a view on either or, because I think each debate has nuances. But I think if you look around the country, right, and you see the amount of work that's there to be done, and still we have high unemployment, you know. One of the things we picked up in doing our National Youth Service Program, for example, you know, where young people are able to do actual work that benefits their communities. So, for example, in one of our programs, we had young people who were reinvigorating after-school programs, after-school sports, arts, culture. And that doesn't only have an impact on the young person themselves, right? The majority of teenage pregnancies happen between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. Yeah. So by giving young girls the opportunity to be able to have a space where they can go, where they're safe, and they're able to do something with their lives that takes them away with negative implications in their society, you don't only have an impact on a young person, but you have an impact on the community as well. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. And the amount of young people in that program who said to us, it's not only about earning an income for the first time in my life, or contributing to my community. The respect I get at home, when I go home, and my parents are able to treat me as somebody who has a job, or my siblings, you know. The respect and the self-esteem that adds to me is massive in nature. So I think that for all the criticisms around public employment programs, they have value. Yeah? And I think South Africa needs to look at something that looks like an employment guarantee for South Africa's youth. Yeah? Because I think that we have a contingent of young people who are ready and willing, right? And I think it really, if we look at post-1976, the struggle of this generation has to be addressing this economic transformation. Yeah. And I think a job guarantee, even if it's not universal at this point, is awesome and a good way to be able to meaningfully tackle the challenge that we face.
Aphiwe, listening to that, and particularly the impact that something like this would have on the communities if done right. Here's a controversial thing to say. How about we close the national office and then open local municipal office of the NYDA? Maybe they might do a much better job of actually dealing with the issues. We don't need this guy sitting at national.
No, Mr. Mdluli, I think I do not have a problem with the NYDA and how it operates. In fact, it is assisting our youth The point I was driving to, when I mentioned satellite offices of NYT, satellite offices are there, of course, not in each and every municipality, but if you have a satellite office in a certain town, you'll find that it's meant to service about 5 towns, and it's a proper arrangement. The argument I'm raising is that without the directorates that are set up to deal with young people's problems and make sure that they work through the district model and also the satellite offices of the NYDA in ensuring that we address the problems of young people and invest the resources and support of youth-led activities. Whilst we do not have that, you see, when you speak of NYDA, we see the CEO, we see the chairperson of the board. There are many programs that we witness of the NYDA, which is well and good. But my argument is that what happens in social development, what's happening in public works, what's happening in treasury, because we do not have anything that regulates to say, within this financial year, Human Settlement Department, you are expected to employ 40% of young people within the vacancies that will be having. We are expecting that as it relates to business initiatives, we're expecting that 40% of young people and women are beneficiaries of those activities.
Right.
We expect such programs such that when we get to June, we do not get to have rallies and special programs that are created for young people in commemoration of the youth of 1976. But during this month of June, we can be sitting down and analyzing that from the previous financial years that our departments, our agencies, our sitters, and everyone that is accountable, both the public and the private sector, can account and say, this is what has been done for young people, and we can account for it in black and white. Because now we just generalize when it comes to youth problems. We generalize and not bring concrete solutions that we can measure and say, after some time, we have witnessed that government has implemented what it had promised young people of South Africa.
Monitoring and evaluation. Much appreciated. We're out of time. We have to leave it there. Aphiwe, Anisa, Waseem, as well as Tebogo, much appreciated. Thank you very much for coming on.